We're right at the top of the hour. Are you okay if we get started?
I think that's great.
Okay, I want to make sure we're using everyone's time to the best of our abilities. My name is Brandy Strand. I am the Director of Community Relationships for the Utah Nonprofits Association. And we are working to provide timely and relevant resources. And we're very excited to be able to partner today with Devin Thorpe. And I'm going to read a little bit about him, and then I'm going to turn the time over to him because his experience and wealth of knowledge is what we're really here for today. Devin is the author of the book Crowdfunding for Social Good. He has helped nonprofits raise millions of dollars, trained organizations in best practices from coast to coast and internationally. He travels extensively as a volunteer during doing service. He's a journalist finding heroes and a speaker sharing what he's learned. As a Forbes contributor, he covered social entrepreneurship and impact investing, reaching an audience of over 2 million people. He's produced 1,200 episodes of his Your Mark on the World show featuring luminary change agents, such as Bill Gates. That's a good name. It's a good family. He's a best-selling author, and his books have been read over 1 million times. His passion is to help people, and he is definitely seeking to do the most good because Devin has chosen to run for Congress to serve the people of Utah's 3rd District. Now, as a best practice, I will state that we do not endorse any one particular candidate, but we do definitely love the expertise of our community, and Devin is absolutely one of those leaders in our community. And without further ado, I'm going to turn the time over to Devin. Thank you, Devin.
It is such a pleasure. Brandy, thank you for doing that great introduction. I'm going to pull up some slides here to illuminate what I'm trying to communicate, and I hope they are helpful to the discussion. I was thinking about how to title this presentation as I was preparing it, and the old novel and movie Love in the Time of Cholera came to mind because we were talking really about fundraising in the time of COVID-19. So there are some challenges here, but let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I know it's hard to see on this picture, but I'm the hobbit on the right. When I was just 11 years old, I had the opportunity, well, some of you, there may not be anybody on the call that's old enough to remember when the Teton Dam failed up in southeastern Idaho near Rexburg, and it left the town of Rexburg just about destroyed. About 80% of the structures were damaged or destroyed by the flood, killed thousands and thousands of animals, cattle, and also about 13 people. But that summer, people from all around the western United States visited Rexburg to help clean up the muck and mud out of basements. And my dad invited me to go up with him to help. And I remember thinking that was a really exciting opportunity. And we got on buses about 2 o'clock in the morning, rode through the night, arrived at dawn, worked all day, and then got back on buses and came home in the evening. And I remember thinking I had really made a huge difference. In fact, this is an actual picture taken that day that I just recently got a hold of. And that's my dad in the background, me in the foreground. You can kind of tell that I was having trouble with the empty shovel. And so you can appreciate, I really probably didn't do any good. So I recently went back to Rexburg to look, and I could not find the statue that I thought they would have erected in my honor. Was not there. But, you know, because I thought I had made a big difference, it really was life-changing. And so I vowed a vow that I would never miss an opportunity to help other people. Now, I did. I missed lots of opportunities to help other people. I'm not saying that I never did any good, but I missed plenty. And went on to have a successful finance career. But after I got fired from the best job I'd ever had as the CFO of a global food and beverage company, I channeled that enthusiasm of my youth into an effort to do the most good I could as a champion of social good. And Brandy did a good job of explaining that part of my career. So anyway, that brings us to the present, I do want to just share one final little anecdote before we jump into this. I don't look like a runner. I admit, I do not look like a runner. I'm kind of short and round on the edges. And so I don't really look like your traditional lanky runner, but I do actually run quite a bit. And so I run up City Creek Canyon most often these days. And one day I came around a bend in the road and I saw a mountain lion dart off into the trees. I thought, wow, that's kind of cool. I wasn't really nervous, but I thought, it's, mountain lion. Occasionally you read about a mountain lion that eats somebody. And then around the next bend in the road, I saw 3 attractive middle-aged women walking toward me, walking down the canyon I was running up. And I saw them for about 100 yards as I was running toward them. And of course, they're walking toward me. So I just had a moment or two to think about what to say to warn them. And so I just sort of blurted out as I passed, "Beware of the cougar." And it was probably a mile later that it occurred to me that I might have said that another way. So I will do my best today to communicate more effectively than I did with those 3 women who probably still think I was insulting them. But let's talk a little bit about how to do some fundraising in this crazy time. I want you to know today's message really is 100% fresh. I stepped back. I've done training on crowdfunding and written the book. This is all years and years of work. And I stepped back and said, what is it really that we can do that would help nonprofits today in this situation? And, we do have a lot of people who are at home who aren't normally at home, both during the day when they're normally at work and in the evening when they normally would have been out socializing. So there are a lot of people available to engage. And so I think that the key thing for fundraising right now is to engage your crowd as fundraisers on your behalf. That's the critical thing here, the critical fundamental strategy. That's what's different than what most nonprofits. Now, some of you will say, well, yeah, we do that all the time. We have a formal program and we do this. And I hope you will help me. I'm going to kind of put off questions and comments until the end just because of the format we have structured here. But save all of your comments and questions, and we will deal with them. We'll spend at least half our time today on questions and your comments, because there are a lot of great insights on the call here. I'm not the smartest one here, but I'm happy to facilitate the discussion. And so these, my thoughts and comments here are really intended to help get you thinking about how you can do this. But the key fundamental strategy I'm going to talk about today is trying to engage some of your fans and followers as fundraisers for you in this, fundraising in the time of COVID-19. So the first step is to pick a time, a window of time. It could be as short as a day. You all remember when we used to do Love Utah, Give Utah, and that was a one-day crowdfunding campaign. University of Utah has adopted that model independently now, and they do a giving day. Actually, it's about a 72-hour giving window, I think, that they use. So they're doing like a 3-day giving day. But you could do it for a week. You could do it for a month. However you want to do it. I'm convinced that you don't want to do it for more than a month because there's just not enough to be gained. You'll wear people out with the messaging and the activity, but then you want to set a reasonable goal. Now, I know that you think about the budget at the University of Utah. I think their annual budget is measured in the billions, but if it's not billions, it's hundreds of millions of dollars, right? A very big budget. And yet they still make time to do a campaign that raises like 50 grand every year. It's just part of, making, building a diverse portfolio of sources needs to include this. And for some of you, that haven't been doing something quite like this in the past, this could be a critical substitute for some of the money that you traditionally get that may not come in this year because of coronavirus. So this is a really good time to try it, but I hope you'll keep it and make this a part of your annual fundraising plan. I like to say that crowdfunding is not a complete development plan, but that no development plan is complete without crowdfunding. So then the key step is to recruit some volunteers. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about platforms. There are lots of good platforms. I want to caution you not to use GoFundMe. GoFundMe, it's not a bad site. And some of you have used it and with success, and you'll tell me I'm just wrong, and that's reasonable. But it is not built for nonprofits. It is built for Peggy and Bob to raise money when their child gets cancer, right? It's built for, individuals raising money to help with their crisis, their personal crisis. Or perhaps a honeymoon. But I want you to use one of these websites that are built specifically to help nonprofits. Now, CrowdRise was purchased by GoFundMe. So it's the same company, but it's a platform built for nonprofits. And you'll see some evidence and influence from GoFundMe now when you're on the website. But I would still use one of these brands designed for nonprofits rather than GoFundMe. So let's talk about how you recruit volunteers. I think it's twofold, right? One part of the process is to make a public outreach on your own social media platform saying, we're looking for volunteers to help us with a crowdfunding campaign or an online campaign or a peer-to-peer campaign, whatever you want to call it. I am agnostic as to what you call this activity, but encourage people to join you from a public standpoint, and you'll get some volunteers who are willing to do it that way. You also ought to talk to everyone on the board about whether they're willing to step up and do this. Oftentimes, board members have really not been engaged during their tenure. I've served on a lot of boards, and many times the board is reluctant to step up and do this. But while the board may not be willing to, as a group, commit to doing this, there may be board members who are willing. So I would encourage you to start with board members. Ask board members not only if they're willing to, but if they know someone in their circle who is a beneficiary or a supporter or a donor. Some of your donors would much rather give than ask. But there will also be some of your modest donors who will be excited to ask because they can't give more. So work your lists with some personal. I think really you'll probably find that more than half of your volunteer fundraisers will be people you ask personally, not people who respond to your public outreach on social media, okay? And so you want to make sure those are really personal asks. Now we want to organize your volunteers into 2 or 3 groups, depending on how much money you want to raise and how many volunteers you get, right? Those 2 things drive how you might organize your campaign. But the 3 groups I would break them down into are people I would call boosters. And I don't want to make it sound like this is a universally understood term for this. This is my term for this. So boosters would be people who would commit to share your stuff, your campaign on social media only. That is helpful. In fact, it's really helpful in ways other than fundraising, right? For branding, helping people learn about the organization, increasing your just familiarity in the community and having more people understand what you're doing. That's really helpful to have a lot of people posting on social media. But most of you know, you've tried raising money on social media, and it's actually pretty hard to raise a lot of money on social. It's easy to raise a little, hard to raise a lot. Okay, so then the next group of people would be people I would call champions. Again, that's my term. These would be people that you would get to commit to do social media and personal email to their friends. And then a third group we'll call partners for today's discussion are people who are willing to do social media, email, and phone calls on your behalf to raise money. So now some of you are going to say, wait a minute, Devin, you're cheating because we're really not talking about online anymore. And I'm going to say, yes, you are right. We're really not talking about just online. I'm cheating. Please forgive me for cheating. But what we're really talking about is what sometimes is called, or more and more increasingly is called, peer-to-peer fundraising. I still like to call it crowdfunding, but it doesn't matter what you call it. Final thing is some of the people who sign up, who commit, who come to the training, who do everything in advance will do nothing to actually raise money for you. Sometimes that will be because something comes up in their life, right? And right now, it's not hard to imagine what might come up, right? Someone who is healthy today and is healthy for the next week, goes through the training and gets excited maybe for the next 2 weeks and then disappears, might have gotten sick. Other people love the idea of helping you raise money, but when it comes right down to it, can't make the ask. I remember helping the University of Utah organize a little call. We did a little phone banking back. This is 15 years ago. So it's been a long time. I was teaching as an adjunct professor at the University of Utah, and so I offered students extra credit if they would come do some fundraising calls on a Saturday morning. And so I had a student, one of my best, brightest, most enthusiastic students, almost teacher's pet kind of personality. He came and he sat at a desk with a phone in his hand with the intention and purpose of making phone calls to ask people for money. And he sat there for 2 full hours looking at the script, reading it over, thinking about it, looking at the list of phone numbers he'd been assigned, thinking about it, and never made a call. So this was someone who was willing to devote the time, but could never make the ask. So just understand that there are people who will tell you they will do it, who won't do anything, and I would just ask you to be patient with them. There may be nothing you can do to make them actually do it. So just be prepared for that. Okay, so let's talk about how we train and prepare them. So for your boosters, so these are people who only commit to do the least, just post on social media. And again, I think these are valuable people, and this is what people who volunteer online may be most willing to do. And this is great. This is helpful. It won't raise a lot of money, but it is helpful. So prepare a short YouTube video to describe what you want them to do as specifically as possible. And you want to make it clear and easy and fun. So prepare the video, send the video out. Then next you're going to want to actually tell them what to post. I know this sounds like, well, how hard can it be? And you want to encourage them to customize and come up with their own posts too. You don't want to tell them they're required. The last thing you want to do is tell them they're required to use your posts. But the fact of the matter is, I'm a professional writer, and you know what I hate to do as much as anything is write. No, I exaggerate a little bit, but I've realized over the years that it takes a lot of energy to write. It takes real energy and thought and preparation. So do that for them. Take some time, devote real time to coming up with crafting a series of social media posts that you can share with them. Now, I would suggest putting it in like a Google Drive folder, a Dropbox folder, so they can just copy and paste text, upload, download, move graphics around, so they've got all those resources there. But you can tell them specifically, this is what to post on Monday, this is what to post on Tuesday, this is what to post on Wednesday, this is what to post on Thursday. Give it to them. And you can encourage them to customize it as much as they want, but most people won't customize it. They will just post it. And I want to encourage you to write all those posts, not as if you are writing from the standpoint of the organization. But remember, you're writing this for your boosters to share. So write in their voice as much as you can, not the organizational, institutional voice. So give them all those posts, make it easy. Even though you've done that, many of them are not going to do it. That's a reality. So another thing that you can get them to do is simply send it every morning. You'll want to post on your institutional accounts about the campaign. So on your Twitter, your Instagram, your LinkedIn, your Facebook, everywhere, you want to post about the campaign. Well, then send everyone a link to all of your posts across all of your social media things and ask them to like, comment, and share, or retweet, or repost. Because it's often really, it's easier to click the Twitter link on your email, see the tweet that came out this morning, and click the retweet button and move on. That whole process can take 3 seconds, right? It's so incredibly easy that even someone who is too lazy to take the 30 seconds to copy and paste the proposed tweet into their own Twitter will be able to take the 3 seconds required to click the link in an email and then click the retweet button. So I encourage you to just make it as easy as possible. Do as much of the thinking, as much of the work as possible, but encourage your boosters to engage. Now, you'll do the same with your champions, right? You'll give them all of the same tools with respect to social media. But in addition, you probably want to have a Zoom call to do some training with all of your champions to talk about their email campaign, right? Because they're, in addition to social media, these are people who've committed to send emails on your behalf. And I would challenge your volunteers that are willing to call themselves champions and commit to send emails to send 100 individual personalized emails. Effective emails are not sent from MailChimp, right? This is the opposite of that, as close to the opposite as you can imagine. You want to be sending, what I often teach people to do is, and I would encourage you to teach your volunteers to do this, right? Start by writing an email to your mother asking her to donate to the nonprofit. Most people, when writing an email to their mother, will not use a lot of marketing language. They'll not write a long email. They will write a short email in clear, plain language. And they won't attach a lot of pictures and media, and they're not going to make it look like it came straight from, Teen Vogue or something. It's going to just be like every other email you send your mother, which is just a short email. Some of you never email your mother, but because you call her too much, right? But if you email your mother, you think about it, it's going to be short and succinct and plain, and that actually is the effective email to send. Now, you can't send an email to your sister Sue that says, "Hi, Mom," right? So you have to customize the email. And you can use mail merge software. There's lots of great mail merge software for that. So if you use Outlook, you can use Word and Excel to create that. You don't have to. Some people hear mail merge and Word and Excel, and they just start to and there's parallel things, tools for Google Drive that you can use with Gmail. It works really slick. If that intimidates you or your volunteers, don't spend a lot of time trying to train them on those skills. Instead, just teach them to, copy and paste that core language, and then to customize each of the 100 messages in their their Gmail or their Outlook or whatever other tool they're using for email, just to send customized, personalized emails. So really, the effectiveness of these emails, the key is the personalization and customization. About 1% is remembering to actually make a clear ask, please donate to the campaign, and then the follow-on is to make sure that there's a working link to actually make the donation. And if your audience skews over 60, one of the things to do is probably send instructions on how to mail a check. Because people over my age oftentimes still want to send a check. So anyway, send them those instructions. But the key really is in the personalization, because if you forget to leave the link, your friends who feel like you've written them an individual personal email ask will write back and say, oh, I'd love to give, where, how, right? So the personalization is just way more important than making the effective ask. But that's the other thing to remember to do. Okay, so let's talk about the partners. Now the partners, in addition to getting all of the training we've talked about, so you probably want to you'll send the partners the YouTube video. You'll invite the partners to come to the Champions email training call. Now you're going to do another call with them, just the partners, and talk about how to do phone calls. Now for phone calls, I would encourage you to encourage them to make a list of 30 of their closest friends and their best friends. And the reason I don't say richest friends is really simple. I want the phone calls to be pleasant, right? Because you don't want them reaching outside their close network to someone who will say no. If everybody calls Lisa Eccles to ask for $1,000, Lisa will get really annoyed, even if they're like tangentially connected to her, right? And she'll say no. And she'll say, well, or she'll say some version of no, right? Well, there's a process, and here's the process, and this is what you do, and we'll happy to consider it. I don't know. Have people call their 30 closest friends, because what will the conversation be? It will be pleasant. It will be fun. And you say, can you donate? And you'll be happy. I'd be happy to give you $20. And you say, that's great. Thank you for giving $20 to the campaign. That is great. And you'll find that your friends will donate different amounts. And everybody has a little different network of friends, but many people have friends who will gladly give $100 and gladly give $50. And just about everyone, when you get a personal call from a friend, you're going to say, I'll give you 10 or $20. Almost no one would just say no to a friend. So you get money from everybody you reach. That's kind of the goal. Now, one of the things that I have learned just lately, this is really one of the things I've learned from the campaign. I tell you that the crowdfunding experience I've had is really helpful on my political campaign. It's really, really, really helpful. But I'm also finding I'm learning new things. And one of the key things that I have come to appreciate is the need for follow-up. So when you call and you leave someone a voicemail message, you need to follow up with a text or an email, because some people never check their voicemail, and invite people to give you a buzz back or tell them what you're up to, and then follow up with them again. So target actually talking to 30 people, or to get those 30 to donate. But these should be 30 people who actually will give something. You want this to be your close friends, and to whom you can say, when they say, well, I already give to XYZ, say, I understand you already give to XYZ. Could you give $5 or $10 to this? And, how can they say no? Okay. Now, let's talk about what to expect. A good booster, I wouldn't say that your absolute hard cap on a booster is $500, but if you have 20 or fewer, I would expect your best booster would raise about $500. It may do better. Maybe you'll have someone that will do better. That would be great. If you have 100, yes, you'll probably have someone that raises a couple thousand just doing social media posts, because one in 100 has a great network or figures out a clever way to increase the effectiveness of the posts or something. But most people will raise less than $500. I would expect an average of about 250. A champion. Let's talk about champions. Our champions can raise up to $4,000. And again, I don't mean to suggest that's a hard cap, right? Remember, our champions are raising money on social media and email. If they really do send 100 emails, if they send really well personalized and well customized emails, they will get about 50% of those friends to donate something. Average crowdfunding donations are about $75. It moves around, and it probably varies from organization to organization and person to person, right? Some people's networks are a little bit wealthier. Some people have networks that are a little more modest in their resources. So, these numbers will vary on each person. But if you send 100 emails and half of them give an average of $75, that works up to $3,750. So I'm rounding when I say that they can raise up to about $4,000. So they could get up to 500 from social media, up to 3,750. I would expect on average about half that from champions who actually do something. You also have some people who sign up to be champions who in the end don't. Now, let's talk about the partners. Partners, I think you can hope for maybe $6,500 or so from your best partner. So again, 500 from social media, 3,750 from email, and then the phone calls could raise up to another 2,250. So that's $6,500 or so from your best partners. You could expect an average of $3,000 or so from your partners who actually engage, right? You'll probably have some partners on the list who won't actually do anything. They may be willing to do the booster part, but maybe they don't even do that well. And you just have to be prepared for that. So let's think about, in review, expect $250 per booster, $2,000 per champion, $3,000 per partner. So where does that put us? If you have 10 boosters, that's a total of $2,500. If you have 5 champions, that's a total of $10,000. If you have 3 partners, that's a total of about $9,000. That would give you $21,500. Now, I know there are some organizations who are saying, man alive, that's a big chunk of our budget every year. Chances are good you'll struggle to get that much, in part because you probably don't have that many donors and boosters that you can call on to recruit. You may struggle to get 18 volunteers that really engage in your fundraising. On the other hand, some of you are thinking 21,000 is a drop in the bucket. It's not even worth it. Well, the thing to remember for you is you could probably raise more than this. You might be able to get 20 or 30 boosters, 10 champions, and 5 or 6 partners. And so, the numbers could be significantly higher if you have a really big organization and you do this all well. So that's kind of my strategy for you to implement something that's really pretty actionable. to help you implement a strategy that could help you raise, what I would call $10,000 to $50,000, maybe a little more if you're a very large organization and you really execute well on this strategy. So I'm really eager now to take some questions. I hope there are some, and suggestions. So some of you are probably thinking, Devin, you're up in the night, you don't know what you're talking about. I welcome that kind of constructive feedback. Let's have the discussion here. So there are lots of ways we can do this, but why don't we start by suggesting that you use the chat window, the chat tool. So down at the bottom of your screen, if you hover your mouse over my face, then you plop down to the bottom, you can see there's a Q&A button and a chat button. You're welcome to use either of those to ask a question or make a comment. And that will be really helpful to the group.
So Devin, while they're typing, I have a question for you.
Please.
Have you ever heard of the platform Give Lively? It says, I've had a couple of nonprofits ask me about this over the past few years, and it's a free online fundraising platform. And I was just kind of curious if you had experience, or maybe if anybody else on the call has experience with Give Lively.
I have not used Give Lively or talked to anyone who has. And clearly they do have I'm just pulling up their website, they do have what they advertise as a free platform. There's another one that I didn't mention and probably should have, but there is for those of you who work in the health space, there is a website called Caring Crowd that does this as well. But Caring Crowd is owned and operated by Johnson & Johnson, and Caring Crowd matches donations. So they charge a little fee, but they match most of the donations. So it actually works out to be a lot better than a free platform. But so Allison asks, is crowdfunding regulated via state solicitation registration rules? For example, we are not registered in California, but what if an email or call goes out to a champion or sponsor's friend in California? Are we required to register in California? I'm not a lawyer, and so I'm not going to tell you what the law says, but I will tell you as a practical matter, I think you are, that there is very, very low risk, right? Very, very low risk, especially if you are, have the state solicitation approved in Utah. Some states don't even have a solicitation registration requirement. That varies state to state. I'm not aware of any local organization that, as a practical matter, seeks the registration in all 50 states, or to find out at least which ones don't require it. Anyway, so yeah, as a practical matter, I think you're fine if a few calls go out to other states. If people reach out to 100 people and 10% of those are out of state, I realize that adds up to a lot of calls and maybe a material amount of donations, but I still think you're probably okay if you are properly registered in Utah. I don't think the state, attorneys general in California are going to chase down a little nonprofit in Utah who had people reach out of state. So I think you're okay. Again, I'm not an attorney. You could ask your attorney for legal advice and get a sense of whether it's worth pursuing that in other states. But
we also, with UNA, have resources for multi-state registrations. So if you have questions about this, I just put it onto my list of things to follow up on so I can dig a little bit deeper. Just go ahead and drop me an email, bstrand@utahnonprofits.org, and I will make sure to follow up with you. We do have a comment from Benjamin Sessions.
Yes, so Benjamin and I are good friends. I actually am on Benjamin's board. So Benjamin says, I love this idea, but I haven't run a crowdfunding campaign before. How do you get over your initial nervousness with getting started? That is a great question. And I don't know that there is a perfect answer. I think about that student that came to my University of Utah fundraising exercise so many years ago, right? He just could not he could not do it, could not do it. For 2 hours, he sat there and couldn't make one call. My experience is that people are really, if you do a good job of personalizing, people are not offended by these calls or emails. And in fact, they're eager to help. If you make reasonable asks, reasonable to modest, I would skew that direction, right? So that you're asking, I oftentimes ask ridiculously modest amounts. So I remember one crowdfunding campaign, I asked everybody for $4. I think the average donation was 50. Now that obviously is a little bit personal to me and my network, but I did have a few friends who gave $4 because I asked for $4. But I think they are friends who, had I asked for $25, would have just not done it. And the key the key is to make modest asks. I say the key. Lots of little things here. Good personalization removes the anxiety, but it also helps the recipient to feel accountable. The opposite of a good personalization is really the BCC, right? If you send 100 friends a BCC email, no matter how well crafted the email is, what you have done by sending it as a BCC is say, I'm too lazy to send you a personal email, and I'm sending this to everyone in my Rolodex. So you personally don't have to worry about giving, donating, helping in any way, because I'm sending this to everyone in my Rolodex. Now, you may only have sent it to 100 of your closest friends, but you've implied by sending a generic request, BCC, that it's gone to everybody and no one is responsible to give, and no one will. But if you send personal emails, they will. So I think really, to get back to the core of your question, the trick is for those who can to send one email and to make one phone call. And as soon as you've done those two things, you will find that the second one is a lot easier. So yeah, I would just start. Now, for small organizations, and Benjamin's is a relatively small. He runs Circles, Salt Lake, which is a great nonprofit that helps people work their way out of lower income situations and squarely into the middle class. Great organization. But it's a relatively small organization with a small budget and relatively modest list of donors. So, realistically, a really successful crowdfunding campaign for Circles might look like $10,000, not 50. Okay, so Ron asks, I'm with the Trails Foundation of Northern Utah. We are thinking about a membership campaign similar to those run by public radio and TV. What are your thoughts about annual memberships campaigns conducted primarily using social media, email, and phone calls? Yeah, I think that aligns perfectly. And it's a great way. I think it's brilliant to take everything I've talked about today, and instead of asking for a one-time donation, to ask for a membership, an annual sustaining donation. So yeah, I think that makes great sense. The only trade-off is if you do this outreach and it's effective and you effectively reach 2,000 people, you're going to have one or two that drop $500 or $1,000 on you. Not a lot, but one or two. And if you are sending out a membership drive kind of thing where you're giving people a number, like for $50 you can be an annual member, or for $25 or $100, you do sort of limit yourself to that amount. So that's the only downside I see with that process. But you could, rather than make it a membership, just ask people to to opt in to make their donation an annual donation, and look for a platform that will allow that. Most of the platforms, I shouldn't say most, I am quite sure all of the platforms are not capable of that. So if you want to do an annual kind of deal, make sure that you find a tool that will facilitate that recurring annual donation. So look for that upfront as you do it. But Ron, I think that's a genius strategy. Any other? Let's see. Maybe there's another question. Oh yeah, that's that. So we answered live. That's done. Okay. So any other questions or comments or suggestions? I know some of you have probably raised a ton of money in the past, very successfully, and probably have thoughts about this. And we'd love to have your thoughts, contrasting opinions. Golly, if I said something that you say is just wrong, I'd love to hear it, so everyone gets the benefit of that. Molly says, I work for Elevated Mountain Guides, a nonprofit that works in the outdoor accessibility here in Salt Lake. We had tossed around the idea of rewarding donations with merchandise. What do you think of that? That is a great question. I love that question. In crowdfunding, typically there are lots of different kinds of crowdfunding, and we use that word to describe a lot of different things. More and more, it's coming to represent what happens on GoFundMe, right? That's probably what comes to mind when you say crowdfunding to most people. But there's also crowdfunding that's regulated. This kind of crowdfunding is very lightly regulated, but investment crowdfunding. So entrepreneurs can now use crowdfunding to raise investments, and that's very tightly regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. But this kind has little to do with that. But of course, many of you are also familiar with the Kickstarter, Indiegogo world. And on those platforms, merchandise is what it's all about, right? You're getting a DVD, a video, a doll, a poster, something. It's always understood on those platforms that something shows up in the mail, or at least an email and a download if you give to one of those campaigns. So you're on the right track, Molly, thinking about using merchandise. Of course, in a nonprofit organization, the donation is not fully deductible to the extent that there is merchandise or something of value in exchange. And so you have to be careful about the rules around that, so that IRS has something to say about how that works. As a general rule for nonprofits, and you'll see this a lot, especially with public radio stations, right? They do their big drives a couple times a year, and we all get a little bit annoyed listening, because all they do is talk about asking for money for 3 days, twice a year. But they will often have rewards for people who donate over a certain threshold. So if you give $100, you get a mug and a download of a video or something, and maybe a DVD, but probably more likely a download these days. But of course, you'd never pay $100 for a download of a movie and a mug. You just wouldn't. So it's not a question of you're selling those things, you're donating, but it does then require an adjustment to what's tax deductible for the IRS. Of course, and I'm getting off into the weeds a little bit, it isn't as big a deal anymore, tax deductibility, because most people, now your big donors, of course, if you're people who are writing checks over $1,000, in all likelihood are deducting those donations. But people who are writing modest checks, chances are they can't deduct them anyway, because the standard deduction is so high that most people aren't actually itemizing anymore. So that's kind of a long answer, but I think it's very good. Bottom line, Molly, very good to explore that. Just remember the IRS rules. And be sure to leave yourself lots of cushion, lots of margin. So don't give $100 item for $100 donation. Give a $20 item for a $100 donation. That'd be my counsel. Of course, you can experiment with it any way you want, but that'd be my counsel. Let's see. Anonymous attendee says, there's a big fundraiser that pulls from our typical crowdfunding community in June. Do you have suggestions for how to schedule around that? Is August enough time between the two? Do we need to try to get in before June? Boy, that is a great question. My answer is, yeah, I would try to sneak in before June if you can pull it off. Especially if you haven't done it before and you've got a gap in your funding right now because of coronavirus. I would try to sneak it in beforehand. Otherwise, yes, I would wait at least so that you have separated the memory of the June crowdfunding by that 45 to 60 days and do it in August or September, so that people aren't feeling that immediate recollection of that having made a donation to a similar related organization. So good thinking, very good thinking. I congratulate you for that, anonymous attendee. Great to hear from you. Anyone else? I haven't lost my voice. Oh, let's see. Clever Octopus. That's Sherry. I read the deduction threshold for individuals is being adjusted this year to encourage folks to give. Is that correct? And the answer is, I'm not entirely sure of what the new rules are. And yes, I know that there was consideration of that. And UNA and I were advocating for some pretty generous rules. What we were advocating for was a $2,000 tax credit that would be available on the 2019 return for donations made in 2020. Now, I don't know what happened. Brandy, do you know what happened?
Yes, I'm just trying to pull up the language right now because it was recently in part of this recent stimulus package, and I don't want to misspeak because I feel like that happens way too often. So we like to lead with the right information.
That's good. So
what we do have is the contribution deduction is up to $300 against your adjusted gross income in 2020. So it's not going to be retroactive to 2019. A qualified charitable contribution is a charitable contribution that is made in cash and is otherwise eligible for a charitable contribution deduction and is made to certain public supported charities, if not all, of everyone on this call. So it has been adjusted, and there are still discussions as everything always keeps coming up. But yes, it has been adjusted, and I would recommend that talk with a tax preparer because I can read really well, but I don't give legal advice.
Yeah, that's great. So one of the strategies that you could use is to advertise the new tax rule in your crowdfunding campaign so that people know that they can get a tax benefit, because people who have been donating the last couple of years under the new tax rules would not necessarily know that they could do that. So great questions. Oh my God.
We also have resources with some language around that, and to help direct people to viable resources and information. And it's on utahnonprofits.org. Under resources, we have a whole section for COVID-19 resources for nonprofits where you can find more information so that you can make sure that you're communicating the correct information.
Excellent. And Jenny pointed out that you are right, Brandy, which of course no one doubted, but that's good to hear. And she points out that it's also $600 for couples, which of course makes perfect sense. So, any other questions as we wrap up? Well, let me thank all of you for taking the time to be here. And Brandy, it was an honor and a privilege for me to participate today. Thank you very, very much for having me. It was really, really fun, and I'm grateful for the chance. Oh,
I want
there's
to
one
say just,
question.
do you have something written along this line that you can share?
Yes. Let's do a couple of things. Because this presentation itself is brand new, I don't have a lot of supporting materials for this specific strategy. But the principles that I discuss are largely covered in my book, Crowdfunding for Social Good, which can be downloaded from Amazon. And I will send Brandy, when I send Brandy the video, which will include my slides by definition, I will also send my PowerPoint slides so you can flip through those without scrolling through the video as well. I hope that would be helpful. So I'll send those two things out in response to that question. Okay. So
We will make sure that everyone who registered is going to get the links and the follow-up information as well. And as you're going out and about and into the world, please let us know what questions or needs that you have come up. Thank you so much, Devin, for spending this time with us and for helping us to just get a little bit more grounding under our feet about some things that we can do, especially in this just uncharted journey that we are all on. So I just wanted to say thank you for your time and thank you for your commitment to doing good, as everyone on this call is just as committed as well. So thank you all so much for your time today.
thanks a bunch.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.